We enjoy that which we can relate to. It's why politicians make an effort to be seen as normal, why popular media is about intrinsically desirable things, and why our friends tend to be similar to us. This makes it all the more interesting when something succeeds that most can't relate to, nor does one wish they could. This is a story of the game that continues to change the lives of many and how it came to be. December 30th, 2000. A doujinshi titled Shupin Harniche was released in Japan. The material wouldn't spark any noteworthy attention, but prior to publishing, the main illustrator Raita made a decision that, unbeknownst to him, would cause a monumental chain reaction. Raita thought it would be fun to include a few bonus pages at the end of the comic for ideas he'd had for potential anime or video games. One such idea included 5 disabled girls with a small description of each and the concept for a dating sim titled Katawa Shoujo. And between the 2 covers of this Japanese adult comic, the idea would sit there, waiting to be discovered for 6 long years. The year is 2007. Broadband has just started overtaking dial-up internet. When you want to listen to music, you have to download something off LimeWire, and when you want to have a voice call over the internet, your go-to option was an early version of Skype. Back then, when you wanted to find people you had common interests with, your main option was to find a forum for that specific niche. Websites like Reddit, Twitter, and Tumblr either didn't exist yet or were mostly unknown to the general public. One such forum that encompassed a variety of different interests for people to come together and talk about was the anonymous image board 4chan. On January 4th of that year, a translated and colored version of the Katawa Shoujo page would be uploaded to 4chan's anime board. Whether it be by chance, destiny, or just pure luck, the board exploded with discussion of Raita's concept art. People loved sharing ideas with one another of how a disabled girl dating simulator would play out, writing gameplay ideas, their own characters, short stories, etc. Katawa Shoujo discussion would also spread beyond the anime board, with discussion threads sprouting up in the random, video games, video game general, and otaku culture boards. While most were just fantasizing fun what-ifs, a sizable portion of people really wanted to try their hand at making a game out of all the ideas sparked over this one image. The first step began with the creation of an official forum. This would allow for the spreading of ideas to become more permanent, since 4chan threads would delete themselves after hitting a predetermined number of posts. It would also allow for friendships and familiarities to form within this new community, as posters had to first create an account within the forum. It was here that the main characters were given names and the beginnings of a personality. They were Shizune, the girl who was both deaf and mute, Rin, an artist with no arms, Emi, an athlete with no legs, Hanako, a victim of severe burns, and Lily, the blind girl. However, problems manifested themselves quite quickly. Character writer Aura described the forum as so: "It works like a petri dish of creativity, as swaths of completely unorganized, raw ideas are born, fight each other, evolve, and die." One group enjoyed this way of making decisions about the game, a community mixing pot where whatever ideas gained the most traction and popularity would be implemented into the game. However, another group was composed of those who thought that the game needed a concrete team of serious developers and a director/producer with a clear vision of what the final product would look like. This mix of ideologies led to infighting, drama, as well as several new forums being created, each containing their own community of people having their own ideas of how Katawa Shoujo should be made. This, in addition to nothing concrete being created yet, caused many people to lose interest in the project. The once burning passion for a potential community collaboration was dying down. It's unclear just how many forums were created, but using the Wayback Machine, I found at least 4. What we do know is that the division into even smaller groups caused the already waning flames to reduce to mere embers. It was soon looking like the memory of Katawa Shoujo would just be a cool screen cap and an interesting memory for those that were involved. All groups would fade away without completing any semblance of a finished product. All except for one. A team of around a dozen people started by Corporal Crud. Crud made a fresh forum for the new team to use. They started from scratch using the ideas they'd absorbed over the past 4 months of discussion. They decided upon assignments and responsibilities. At this stage, the team looked something like this. Crud would be the producer and Hanako's writer. Anonymous22 would be Shizune's writer. X would be Lily's. Hivemind would be Emmy's and an editor. Aura would be Rin's writer. Y would do background art. Z would be a director and programmer for the engine. And finally, F would do character art. Together, they decided to name themselves 4-Leaf Studios, a reference to the clover logo that 4chan uses. For the first time in Katawa Shoujo's history, there was some semblance of organization. Their decision to form a semi-official development team wasn't just a sign of their determination and seriousness. It was also one of the first international game development teams. Telecommuting, or working from home through use of the internet, began rising in popularity in the early 1990s. By 2007, it was quite common, though it really hadn't been attempted for a creative development project like this before. Today, it's incredibly common for people to make friends online, work from home, and developing games with a remote team is a common occurrence. However, back then, this was all uncharted territory. It's not that the technology wasn't there before this time, it's more so that it was all just very new to people, and no one had tried something of this scale yet. 4-Leaf Studios would have a steep learning curve to overcome. They would also still need more help staff-wise, specifically in the music department. However, they were able to form a sort of layout for the game and get started on development right away. The plan was to write Act 1 together with the contributions of all writers. Then the player would be locked on a character's path from Act 2 to the final Act 4, which would be written by that character's determined writer. It was with this team that a prototype for Act 1, commonly referred to as Grid 1, would be released as a playable demo. This allowed fans to see the progress 4-Leaf Studios had made, and allows us to see what the game looked like at this very early stage in development. The art notably looks much different than it does in the final version. Specifically, the uniforms are green sweaters as opposed to the white blouses seen in the final version, Rin has a different hairstyle, and the backgrounds are also different. Several are black and white, which feels very unfitting for this type of game. The release of a playable demo was a great boost in motivation for the team. It seemed as though this group of amateurs was making real progress toward the creation of Katawa Shoujo. Sadly, following the release of this demo, the team would be hit with a long-running series of heartbreaking events. The lead character artist at the time felt as though he wasn't a good fit for the team. He thought his sprites and artistic skills simply weren't on par with what was needed, and so in fear of dragging the team down, he gave up his position. It's not fair to simply say that his art was bad. Some people even preferred his work, especially his different take on Rin. His style was more akin to 90s anime, and his drawings would ultimately be a stepping stone from the old Raita sketches to a more modern and artistically fleshed out looking cast. It was at this same time that Lily's character writer would be in a serious accident, causing him to withdraw from the project as well. Replacing their main artist would be one of the most challenging tasks 4-Leaf Studios would have to endure. If we look back, we can see members would scout forums for anyone willing to help, and despite the short-term success, they would repeatedly take on and then subsequently lose artist after artist, each one having to scrap the previous material and start over. This caused many parts of the game to repeatedly be redone by new people, and is one reason why Act 1 would be scrapped a total of 3 times, with 4 versions in total having been confirmed and potential for even more. It would be difficult not to refer to this entire situation as development hell, a situation where, despite time passing and work being completed, the project seems to not make any progress due to changes in staff, vision, budget, or a multitude of other reasons. This would have damaged any person's drive to finish the project, and could have resulted in the end of it. As 4-Leaf Studios was having its staffing crisis, they were also receiving copious amounts of feedback from their demo. Thankfully, the community seemed to enjoy it. Something in particular that stood out was the more concise style of writing. You see, visual novels are a medium that originated in Japan, and when they were first being popularized, writers were being paid based on the length of the script. This familiarized fans with long-winded storytelling and made it the norm even for original English-language visual novels. Thus, this visual novel, with a fresh concept and clearly excellent writing, had renewed interest in the hearts of many people, including those from the old 4chan days. However, reception from the public outside of their own niche was different. The origin of Katawa Shoujo would prove to be a point of contention for some. 4chan is a bit like the internet's anti-hero. It's an image board where every single poster can remain permanently anonymous. Anything can be said, posted, done without any repercussions or responsibilities needed. This naturally causes those who have been shunned from other communities for their niche viewpoints to gravitate to 4chan, earning it the title of being a home for bigots, pedophiles, racists, communists, Nazis, all sorts of awful titles for those that dared to use the hateful website. Word had spread that a group of people from that awful site 4chan were creating a dating sim about crippled girls. This very premise sparked hatred in just about anyone who heard about it, as writer Aura himself even admits that it sounds like a horrible idea on paper. During one development blog post, he stated, "A lot of people on the internet are aware of 4chan's reputation as some kind of a horn of plenty of depravity and mindless comedy. So when people from 4chan make a Japanese-style porn game about disabled people, the ingredients for a catastrophe seem to have been thrown into one pot." The worst part is the team wouldn't be able to prove the public wrong unless they were able to actually finish and release the game. But regardless of those in the new growing communities against the project, no publicity was truly bad publicity, as many had formed their own ideas of what offensive material was probably in the game. Some had looked on, their interest piqued. A few even asked about where they could donate to help the project along in development. However, 4leaf Studios completely refused donations and payment of any kind, telling their fans to instead spend their money on a better cause. The logic behind this was that since the team was international and there were so many members who did varying amounts of work, that it would be absurdly hard to distribute the money amongst themselves in a fair way. They thought it would likely just lead to fighting and that it wasn't worth the risk. So they carried on, fueled only by passion. And passionate they were. Despite the constantly changing staff, the writers wanted their stories to be heard no matter how much work they had to put into keeping a team together. Among all the havoc, one exceptionally good thing would result. A man named Suriko would join the team as Lily's new writer and prove to be a vital part of the entire project. He quickly became a producer as well, and is described as being the team's rock, sturdy and supportive. This cemented the final writer in his place, as none of the 5 would be going anywhere for the duration of development. Alongside Suriko, Delta joined the team as the director, overtaking creative aspects of the project to make sure that all the pieces would fit together just right. For the studio's existence, it would go through a number of people difficult to even count. The staff section of their website shows 21 individuals as having their contributions in the final game, with likely dozens more having worked on the project for a time before leaving and having their materials scrapped. These 6, however, with 3 of them being there since the very beginning, are considered the veteran members of the team. A couple of them would have to work to break their own writing habits. You see, 2 of the writers were Australian, and while the game's language would be written in English, it would specifically be American English. This was likely rather difficult, as it's hard to imagine that either of them had had to go out of their way to write in an Americanized manner before then. Despite being amateurs at the medium, all writers were experienced and had high standards of quality. They were brutally hard on each other in terms of critiquing. It could be said that this is the reason the writing rarely drops in quality or changes in style despite each route being written by a different person. However, as good as the arguing was for the quality of the novel, it wasn't uncommon for arguments to get so heated that some would just walk away from the project for days or even weeks at a time to cool off.
We had been critiquing each other's past for so long. We were so vicious to one another in our critiques. I mean, we were really, really hard on ourselves. I mean, and it worked. It worked that we were that hard on ourselves because a lot of people seem to have liked it. But we were we would get into some pretty vicious conversations, and probably at least once for everyone, there was a point where they'd walk away for like a month or so, just because things would get so heated.
Though through the stressful times, each would always come back. Together, they'd learn the importance of not overworking each other. They started to take some light days to have fun and do things like watch movies together, talk about their lives, and wrap up the year with a Secret Santa event. Ultimately, Katawa Shoujo was a hobby for all involved, and it didn't hurt to remind each other that they should be having fun together. 4-Leaf Studios closed out 2007 by taking aboard the game's primary musician, Nicole, who would compose a majority of the game's soundtrack. Moving into early 2008, 4-Leaf Studios continued to bring on one artist after another, only for them to leave some weeks later. Their art problem would finally be remedied that spring when a group of friends who were all artists discovered the project and wanted to contribute. 5 in total joined all together, and each was paired up with a character writer to create what was needed for each route. Together, they would be able to communicate about what was important to establish in each graphic, fine-tuning picture to words, or in some cases words to picture. The revised team looked something like this. Crud and Wee were Hanako's writer and artist respectively, Anonymous22 and Moiki were Shizune's, Suriko and Gebi Terror were Lily's, Hivemind and Primi were Emmy's, Aqua and Cami Fish were Rin's, Delta was the director, and Nicole would make the music. Finally, Crud and Suriko also doubled as producers, and Hivemind would be the head editor. This division of labor was odd at best and incompetent at worst. So let's break it down a little more. Having a different person write the paths of each character all at once is a form of horizontal division. Once the writers finish their scripts, they can combine each path into a single Katawa Shoujo sandwich. It's not too uncommon, and is helped by the team having aspects of reciprocal writing as well. This is when a group of writers all regularly read over and receive feedback from one another, allowing for all 5 writers' voices to be heard in all 5 paths. This is one of the things that's so unique about 4-Leaf Studios. No other company would divide the work this way. In order to remain consistent, a project would typically have an individual or small team do design/rough sketching, another do line art, and lastly one do coloring. The reason 4-Leaf Studios opted to have each artist work on each full image, with multiple artists even working on a single image, is because they didn't want to have to scrap the work of someone's unfinished designs. If artists were to do the entire creation process individually and then leave after some amount of months, then anything that they had completed would still be usable as opposed to having to start from scratch over and over again. It must have been invigorating to finally have a full team of everyone they needed. The first 9 months of the game were questionable, but now they had the chance and things were beginning to look up. Could they actually do this? As 2008 continued, the writers began finishing up their first drafts of each route. They also discussed the possibility of changing the name of the project due to the poor feedback they received about it. They played with work-in-progress names such as Kuar, meaning heart, Broken Heart's Reverie of the Two, Anata, meaning you, and Inochi no Choshi, meaning tone of life. It was a debate within 4-Leaf Studios that would last for almost a year, but they'd end up keeping the name Katawa Shoujo regardless of its offensiveness due to the absurd nature that this game had come to be. They wanted the history of the idea to be easily traceable back to that initial Raita image. The team consulted with medical experts as well as one of their new editors, Silent Cook, who's a registered nurse. They had to make sure they represented the disabilities accurately, aiming for a high level of quality. More artists were brought onto the team, including Raid, Climatic, Doomfest, and Ujovi. The old Grid 1 demo would also finally be replaced, as a new updated Act 1 demo came out in early 2009, generating a good bit of hype over the new look and progress made. The project continued to pick up steam, and by this point was charging ahead at full speed. A very special person also contacted the guys at 4-Leaf Studios offering his assistance. It was an animator, Mikey Nell, and his involvement on the project would be kept a secret all the way up until release. He would end up demolishing all of the team's expectations by producing about 7 full minutes of animation, a huge amount for any singular person to animate on their own. This was made even more impressive by the fact that it was all done in Mike's free time without any pay. It's because of his work that Katawa Shoujo had some moments of extremely high quality. The amazing art and animation would truly hide the fact that the game was made without a budget. The Act 1 demo began to see localizations by fans of the project. Naturally, it was first translated to Japanese, Chinese was next, then French, Spanish, Italian. Soon, fans all over the world were translating the game into dozens of languages. This only furthered the hype and expectations of those anticipating the release of Katawa Shoujo. Managing the hype of your target audience is, and always will be, the most delicate balancing act in any entertainment industry. It all comes down to 2 factors that determine the success or failure of your product: timing and information. Give too much information too soon, and your audience won't care about your product when it finally comes out. Give too little information too late, and the same thing will happen. Finding the correct timing would be difficult, but not impossible. Every single member of 4-Leaf Studios was always their own boss. Having a huge amount of creative freedom can almost never be considered a bad thing. However, not all writers would work at the same speed. Some were further behind than others, but directors and fellow writers would always help to ease the burden in some way, ensuring that the project would be completed on time. Overnight, everyone who had been anticipating the release fell in love with the characters and writing. The game and the studio saw almost universal praise for the amazingly impactful story that left many in awe.
On behalf of all of those people who found their hearts at Yamaku Academy, we love you, Four Leaf Studios. Thank you, all of you, so much for bringing us Katawa Shoujo.
That's it. I'm done with the game. There's nothing that's gonna compare to that.
My heart! I'm dying!
It was truly a sight to behold. A group of people from a site for social outcasts were able to make a game that teaches people about the real struggle and hardships of relationships better than just about any other piece of commonly consumed media. And that's just one idea present in the story. There is no simplified version of Katawa Shoujo's story like don't judge a book by its cover. Of the numerous meaningful messages conveyed in the game, each path communicated many different things by asking a simple question through each character. Can you face your fears? Can you see what I see? Can you stand up for yourself? Can you seize the day? Can you tell me what you think? People didn't just enjoy this game, their lives were changed by it. Shortly after the game was released, a survey was held that asked participants, among other things, if they picked up any constructive habits after playing Katawa Shoujo. Of the around 1,000 participants, a shocking 77% said that they had. The three most common habits were running, eating better, and reduced masturbation. Some more unique ones were quitting smoking and learning sign language at 3 and 4% of participants respectively. An enormous positive reception is all Four Leaf Studios could have wanted. They'd spent 5 years together building up this piece of art. Finally completing what they had set out to do, Four Leaf Studios would hang up their coat. With no plans for any future projects together, they watched on as their creation sailed off into a sea of success. Aura's final post on the development blog of their website reads as such: "Here where I live, it's winter right now. Darkness, snow, and freezing temperatures. I have to stretch my imagination a bit to conjure the spring of northern Japan into my mind. A chill wind prickles my skin through my shirt. Cherry blossoms. Of course those cherry blossoms have to be there too. It's spring after all. A walkway lined with blossoming trees, people going somewhere. It's the graduation day at Yamaku High School, and I'm there. The graduating students walk toward the school building for the last time. We go inside. The hall is packed full of people. Dozens of excited conversations, even in hushed whispers, create a veritable cacophony. The tension is palpable. I can see all of the faces that are so familiar to me. Hisao, Shizune, Misha and Hanako, Rim and Emi, Lily and Kenji, the teachers, they're all there. And maybe we're there too, the Four Leaf Studio members, standing somewhere in the back without anyone realizing it. Graduation is a good metaphor for what we've been going through for the past week. Maybe Shizune would hold the valedictorian speech. That sounds like something we would do. Everyone receives their diploma. One by one, they're called to the front. Would Hanako be comfortable with a couple of hundred of eye pairs on her? How would Rin receive her diploma? All kinds of little questions. The ceremonies are over. People shuffle outside, and all that tension is released in a flood of emotion. Teary eyes, yet happy faces. Hugs and promises to keep in touch are exchanged. The schoolmates you barely knew are your best friends forever today. Some of them you'll never see again. Some you might by sheer coincidence years and years later. Still, even in that distant future, this day will connect you to each other. You might feel an emptiness inside, where the part of your life that is now over used to be. That feeling is familiar to me. Releasing Katawa Shoujo was our graduation day. The future is an open road. From here where we stand, you could go anywhere. The journey of creating Katawa Shoujo was a long one, but now it's over. I'm happy that we could make it together. Thank you, everyone. We enjoy that which we can relate to. And in a time where every other person you meet has anxiety, depression, ADHD, divorced parents, an eating disorder, an abusive ex, and so on, it is normal to have problems. Perhaps in some way, we're all a little bit disabled. And this is how Katawa Shoujo moved us. Thank you for watching.